like I'm getting shot now. Like they're shooting at us, and for the next, I would say, 20 seconds, there was just gunfire being rained all around me, like just like hiding for cover, trying to get to a spot where they can't hit you. And when I was hiding for cover, I felt something hit the side of my face, and I like there was liquid coming down, and I just didn't know what that was, like how bad that injury was at the time. I just knew I was bleeding from my wrists and my head, and eventually the gunfire stopped after like 20 seconds, and the nightmare was over. But there's one memory that sticks out to me, and it still haunts me. But like I remember just looking at my older brother with blood coming down my face, and I'm like, they hit me. They got me, Tyler. Like, get help.
All right, welcome everybody to the Recovery Plus podcast, second episode. On today's show, my guest is my co-host, my friend, my coworker, and a fellow recovered drug addict and alcoholic, Jama Maxie. Jama was born in Regina, Saskatchewan, right by his reserve White Bear First Nations. At a young age, Jama entered foster care, which separated him from his three siblings. Jama was never adopted and remained a Crown ward until he aged out. Growing up, Jama always felt like his skin was two sizes too big because of his dual heritage, Indigenous and African American. He had big dreams. However, he could never achieve them because he became addicted to alcohol and drugs. He struggled with poverty and bouts of homelessness. After his hardships, he had enough and reclaimed his identity by becoming a warrior. He broke the cycle on September 4th, 2018, and got clean and sober. He pursued education and enrolled in college with something to prove. In April 2020, he graduated with academic honors in the social service work program at Georgian College. Additionally, he received the Exemplary Learner Award upon graduation. He received the Indigenous Spirit Fund Award in 2021 for his outstanding efforts in breaking down barriers while achieving his full potential. In 2022, he was elected to the board of directors at Native Child and Family Services of Toronto. He also works at Addiction Rehab Toronto as an addictions counselor, giving back to those in his shoes. He is enrolled at York University for a degree in psychology. His goal is to be accepted into the University of British Columbia to pursue a master's and PhD in clinical psychology so he can work with Indigenous communities struggling with mental health and addiction. Jama, that's quite an impressive story and impressive accomplishments. So I can't wait to hear you tell us more about where you came from and how you made it out and broke the cycle. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
So
Um,
yeah.
I just want to say, like every single time, a bio is read, it just kind of like chokes me up, because when you hear it, when you hear someone else speak it, it just becomes real. It's a surreal feeling, like the things you overcame and stuff to get to where you are now. So, because this is not the first time I've had that experience when someone's read a bio for me.
That's cool, man. That's cool. Well, the first place that I wanted to start a conversation is I wanted you to tell the listeners and viewers about being an addiction and kind of the events leading up to your rock bottom. How bad did it get for you, and what did it look like?
Yeah, it got unmanageable, and it got terrible. It was frightening. It was scary. I like to explain it like this to people. Um, I was too scared to kill myself, but I was also too scared to live, meaning that like I didn't actually, want to kill myself because that's like a very courageous act. Like to actually do that, it takes a lot of courage to actually perform that act. And trust me, I thought about that every single day, virtually from the time I got up, from the time I went to bed. And but I just didn't want to live anymore. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be on this planet. I numbed out from the second I woke up, getting drunk and high, and that was my life. It was just a continuous cycle. I was gripped by it. It owned me. It was my master. I could not control what 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 we call it willpower. I had no willpower. Every single day, it was just a disaster of being like. Um, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. Like I look in the mirror and I just, who is this guy? You're exactly like your mother. You're exactly like the people you resented. You're no better than anyone else. And I thought to myself too, if I were to have a child at this time, I remember it kind of dawned on me, if I were to have a child right now, I'd be exactly what I hated in people is not being able to raise a child. I would be considered dangerous to the child as an addict, and that kid would go through foster care like I did. And I thought to myself, that's pathetic. That is pathetic. And my rock bottom, included, definitely a lot of like financial struggles in terms of like, I slept like outside, like with absolute homelessness. I couch surfed. I had no money, um, and I just, never thought I'd amount to anything. So that lifestyle, kind of just not given a fuck. I don't know if we're allowed to swear on here, but I just did. Um, but that it just became accustomed to my way of living. So yeah, it was when I think about it, there's just so much suffering. I think of the word suffering, and I suffered so much, and I think that's, I'm glad I suffered, because if I didn't suffer in that way, if I didn't get, beat down to a state of desperation where it's like, man, you're either going left or you're going right. There was no options for me. When you're gripped by drugs and alcohol in that way, it's dooming.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the word that was coming to my mind when you were telling me about that is suffering, right? It sounded like you were in a really dark place, and a part of you felt powerless over the situation, but also a part of you, uh, maybe a small part, really wanted to change your circumstance. So can you tell the listeners and viewers, how did it get to that point? So maybe a little bit about your history and how you ended up there.
Yeah, like my history, when I explain my story, people like look at me like, you have a right to be an addict. But like I've realized that I'm not unique. I'm not special. Plenty of people have had worse stories than mine, and so I don't have to think that way anymore. But so yeah, when I was born in Saskatchewan, and my mom struggled with drugs and alcohol. I had no father on my birth certificate. You know what I mean? So not having a dad and stuff like that, definitely impacted me. But when I was born, my mom moved back to Toronto with us, and I got separated from my siblings through foster care, and I was supposed to be adopted and stuff like that, but I never got adopted. I stayed in the foster care system. So growing up, like being Black, Native, not knowing my culture, being in Caucasian families, like I just I didn't even know that I was different. Like it sounds funny, but like when you're not told anything, everything's kind of swept under a rug. I just didn't. I thought my foster parents were my real parents, man. Like I didn't, until I remember one day I was hanging out with this girl from the neighborhood who was also Black, and she put her skin up against mine, and she said, "You're Black too." And I was like, "What? I thought I was white," because it sounds silly, but when you're 5 years old, you don't really know. You just think these are your mommy and daddy. They're the people who feed you or whatever. Give you shelter. So yeah, I felt so disconnected. I felt so I felt abandoned, like that abandonment kind of came up early in my life. And I went through all three forms of major abuse: physical, mental, and sexual abuse in the system. And that definitely laid a huge impact on me, because I wasn't able to talk about it with anybody. And so, I became very good at lying, manipulating, all those things to get what I wanted, and kind of, wearing this mask that everything's okay. When I went into high school and stuff like that, I just wore masks. Um, I started playing rugby, which is a very violent sport, and it worked for me because I was hurt. So, you've probably heard the saying, "Hurt people hurt." So I became the guy who's, never gonna miss a tackle. You know what I mean? Like I just wanted to show my masculinity in that way. So that was where that kind of started, that masculine mask. And at that time, I started hitting my head like really like a lot. Like I got a lot of concussions playing that sport, and I never told anybody. Again, the line, trying to sweep other things under the rug. And while this was all going down, I had started my drug and alcohol use, and it got. I call myself a weekend warrior back then. What I mean by that is like, yeah, I was not drinking during the school days. But come the weekend, I was a wreck. I remember, yeah, just every single weekend was just, like I knew I had a problem with alcohol from the beginning, man. Like, remember in grade 10 and grade 9 and stuff when I would buy like a 26er and everybody was like, this will be good for the month, and that lasted me a night. So and I never once like had the ambition to like put the cork on the bottle and like save it for tomorrow. I just always drank alcoholically, blacked out, passed out, you know what I mean? And so, I had this really good social worker who believed in me in that way. And like, going to college and stuff like that, because I did have a lot of potential. I was a very good athlete, like I mentioned, and I went on to win 2 Ontario gold medals at for rugby. And then, I was going to go to college and stuff like that. And had a really bad problem with my reading and writing. So I lied about that. I plagiarized all of my English in high school. And then I got caught in grade 12 for plagiarizing. That was really embarrassing because it made me realize, like, okay, like, you need to learn how to write, man. Like, it's pathetic. You can't write an essay at, this age. And so thankfully, the next English teacher didn't make us write an essay because I would have cheated because I couldn't write and I wasn't willing to do the work to get me to that spot because I had a learning disability kind of growing up. So I was soft in that way. Like I didn't want to do the extra work. And yeah, so when I went to college the first time, I played on the rugby team. I had this horrible, horrible concussion. I got stomped on the side of my head, and that gave me essentially brain damage. I had over 5 concussions at that time in my life, and that was the final one where the doctor just looked at me and said, "Jama, you can't play this sport anymore. Like, your head's fried," And the next 4 months was me sitting in a dark room, really trying to like I had to like work my way up to just like be able to pedal on a stationary bicycle because my head hurt so much. So it was a lot of depression, anxiety, dropping out of school and stuff. And then I finally got good, and then I would get drunk and I'd smash my head, and the same cycle would happen again. So and then when I went back to school a second time, this time it was just bad because I got into harder drugs at this point in my life, and every single day I'm getting high and drunk, and I'm just becoming an absolute monster, and I'm not liking the guy I'm seeing. And again, I can't do school. I'm lying. I'm cheating. Yeah, I can't do English. I'm lying. I'm throwing that under the rug. You know what I mean? And then yeah, I eventually I was kind of like kicked out of the college because I couldn't. It was mutual. I was on academic probation, and I owed them like 3,000, a lot of money and stuff. And so, anyways, I'm done school for a second time, and that's point is just when in addiction we talk about just like giving up, like just like like what's the point? And that's when I just kind of gave up. After that, I think I was about 20 years old, and I just gave up on myself, and that's when things got really, really bad. I mentioned that dark spot, like the poverty, the homelessness, the using every single day, the what's the point of living, the suicidal ideations, the that terrible, terrible lifestyle. That's when it really set in. Like, and at the same time, Freud talks about repression of memories and a lot of his work, and how people can repress memories. All this trauma that I had when I was younger, I repressed it a lot. Like I put it in a bottle, and I didn't even remember it really. Like it was so weird. It was just like overnight, kind of like this trauma was like full force in my consciousness, and I couldn't escape it. Like it was like I was reliving a lot, like certain memories that I just couldn't escape, man. And I thought they never came up in early in my life, and then in my 20s, they were just yeah, it was just really bad. And I would I started to see a psychiatrist and got diagnosed with a complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and which solidified my role as the victim, and didn't give me much solution. And yeah, so it was there. I remember like people looking at me when I would tell them my story and stuff, like professionals, and they're like, "Wow, like you have one messed up life," and it's like, yeah, thank you. I know that already. Um, like I need help, man, and so yeah, looking back, I did have a shitty life, but like I was asked this the other day by somebody, like, would you have changed it? And absolutely not, absolutely not. I think all that made me who I am today, and I know it's kind of cliche, but it certainly I certainly wouldn't have it any other way because I love who I am today, and it was shaped, formed, molded by those dark times. So.
I can relate to that giving up point as well, where I remember I just kind of stopped fighting the addiction and kind of gave into it and just decided, like, this is it from here. Like, I accept this, and this is what I'm gonna just keep on doing. So what was it then that kind of gave you the motivation or that moment of clarity where you said, okay, like this is enough, and I want to get help? And what did you actually do to start the recovery process?
Yeah, so like the summer of 2018, like I like was looking into rehab options and stuff like that, and obviously my financial situation wasn't an option. Um, but I had the seed kind of planted in my head, like I need help, but I was too scared to get help, so to speak. You know what I mean? But I had uh, two people that I would say, well, one specific person, he's like a foster. He was one of my foster brothers, and he was really bad into alcohol, and also suffered with like homelessness and stuff like that. And I remember at my foster brother's wedding, um, he was like not drinking, and I was trying to get him to drink. Like I was like, "Yo, like I'll call my guy, and like we can party." You know what I mean? And he's like, "I don't do that anymore." And I'm like, "What the fuck?" And I looked at him all weird, and he told me about the 12-step program and how it changed his life. And I just looked at him like, whatever, dude. But I knew that was out there. And I also like really wanted to try the school thing again because I knew I was like at one point during my addiction, I didn't talk about this, but I was a janitor. Um, so I was scrubbing shit out of toilets. That was like the far as my qualities were taking me at that point. So I knew I was better than that. So I always knew like I needed to. I'm too smart for this, And but I knew I can't do school again while using, So a lot of those motivations were kind of in my head and floating around. And was that it was a Wednesday that September, and I was picking like empties out of recycling bins and bringing them to the beer store to just get enough to have a few beers. And yeah, I just felt like I was a bum. I was a bum. I shouldn't sugarcoat it. And that's when I just kind of, I don't know, man. I just like kind of got on my knees, so to speak, and just like I can't do this anymore. Like I'm really gonna um, kill myself one of these days. Like I'm gonna build up that courage. I'm gonna do it now. And so I ended up calling the number for the 12-step meetings, and asking when the meeting was and stuff. And so I went to that meeting, and I don't want to go too into what happened in that meeting, but I had a surreal spiritual experience where people call it odd or God. I know it was God that night. I met my now sponsor, who has literally the exact same story as me. And like he didn't want to go to that meeting. I remember he was telling me, but something was kind of telling him to go. And I kind of trauma dumped in the meeting, and he just like resonated and identified with, had the same story. You know what I mean? So yeah, he gave me his number, and I started kind of going through the steps and taking direction. And now I had somebody who believed in me, a mentor who had been there, kind of thing. So and I applied to Georgian College, and I got waitlisted, and So now things are looking good.
Nice. That's amazing. I heard a couple of things there that I think are important for people who are listening and who are also going through addiction right now. And that is, you got to a really dark place, and then you met somebody who you knew who had also struggled with addiction, and he kind of was able to point you to the 12-step program, and he was clean and sober at that point. So maybe that gave you a little bit of hope that it was possible.
Absolutely. Like, that moment was like, at the time I didn't know, but the seed was planted. Like, if he can do it, I can do it kind of thing. So, when I got to that point where I just, you know, wanted to sincerely change. And there's a difference where I think a lot of people go into recovery programs or I've been to like I'll just say like there's a lot of people I know from working in this field and stuff. They go into recovery for other people. My experience was not that. I didn't have a girlfriend trying to get me sober, mom trying to get me sober, family trying to get me sober. I was doing it truly, authentically for myself because I was going to end my life. I'm like that day probably, to be honest, and so the motivation was internal, like it wasn't like external, like for to please other people or to show like anyone that I was doing it for me.
That's the part I also resonate with is even though the way you were living, you would say, you said I basically was a bum, right? Like the way I was living was definitely embarrassing for me, but there was always a part of me that felt like I wasn't meant for this kind of way of life. And that's what it sounds like you
Yeah,
had as well. You said like I felt like I could do better.
yeah, yeah. That conscious, like you're conscious, we can't like measure it, but it's there. Everyone has that voice in their head, and that thing was beating me apart, man. Like you're not supposed to be this guy, like you have something special in you, and I didn't know what it was at the time, but I knew that there was something special, so I just didn't listen to that voice for a long, long time, but it was always there.
Yeah. And it's hard to distinguish that voice from the voice that says, hey, you could do this on your own, right? Like you're strong enough to do this on your own. And this is what kept me sick for a really long time, and I think it keeps a lot of people sick, is that they think that just because they're good at one thing or several things that they can actually then overcome their addiction, right? But we both know that for
Yeah.
you and I, what it required was the help of somebody who had been able to do it as well, right? You called that person a mentor, a sponsor, somebody that you related to, that you met at the meetings and had what you wanted, and was able to guide you through the process, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I knew me on my own devices. One of the first sayings that kind of resonated with me is your own thinking got you here, and like my own thinking like got me crying in a basement. Uh, like my own thinking could not do it. Like I tried counseling, I saw the psychiatrist, I tried different ways, I tried the control drinking, I tried everything, in that sense. So my own thinking, like me on my own devices, wasn't working. So I kind of took a statistical analysis of the people in the room, and everyone kind of was clean for a long time, so I was like, why if like this guy's got 10 years, this guy's got 15 years, this guy's got 20 years, this guy's got 5 years, this guy's got 2 years. I was like, okay, like they're doing it. Like I don't care if, I don't put aside my judgments of what this place is or um it's working, it's working. I'm not an idiot, it's working. So I'm not gonna fight it, I'm just gonna take direction, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so you had that change of mindset where you said, okay, to some extent, I recognize that it's my own thinking that's led me to this point. So instead of following my own thinking, I'm going to listen to somebody else and follow their directions on how to get out of this predicament. So tell me what that process was like for you, and like how did you feel after you worked the steps?
Yeah, like after working the steps, like I just felt alleviated of a lot of like my mental health issues, which to me was a shock. Like to me is still, I had such bad anxiety in early recovery and in active addiction. It was terrible. Like I was scared of my own shadow. So you know what I mean? Like I couldn't even like I was having like these panic attacks like in public and stuff. So I would like be scared of going outside and having a panic attack in front of people. Like I was panicking about having panic. So it got really bad at that point. And time I finished the steps, man, I have anxiety today, but it's like normal anxiety. Like before I speak, before I like you do like public speaking or if something's like a big buildup of an event. Um, but it's like normal, and that kind of all went away with the steps. Like, of course, I still struggle every day. Still have human experience. I still have emotions, but I'm not like suffering in the way that I was even the slightest bit. So that was like the first thing. My emotions just got like 180 turned around. So that was like the first thing that I noticed. But and I had this God consciousness in my brain, like this kind of, um, I think I sort of always kind of had it in a sense, but like I started to listen to it.
I relate to that as well, right? My emotions, my mind, everything kind of balanced out to some extent after working the program. And then you touched upon the God consciousness. For me, the spiritual aspect of the program is probably the most meaningful and the most inspiring aspect of working the steps. So were you spiritual before you got into the program?
No, not at all, not in the slightest bit. And that's why I didn't like vibe with it at first or like look towards that as my solution. But again, it works. But yeah, so.
And what does being spiritual look like for you today?
Yeah, today, like I always have to tap in with prayer and what that means is like it's very easy to pray and talk to God when things are good, when things are going good, but it's when things are going bad is when I need to pray the most. And I learned that early on. Like it's not about when God says yes, it's about when God says no, and that really tests your spirituality, so to speak, because God's going to say no, and God has said no into my life a lot. Um, so I need to stay tapped in, and I've had so many experiences now where um, if I didn't have this God consciousness, man, I wouldn't be here, brother. I would not be here. And I started to connect with my Indigenous side and start to connect with that culture and follow that spirituality, which I never got connected with prior to getting sober. And I was like, man, like I couldn't vibe really with Catholicism. So I looked at my Indigenous side and like, they have like a belief in animism, which is all things are living or nature, so to speak, and a great spirit. And I was like, man, I identify. So, but yeah, just staying tapped in all the time. Like, even before I get into my car, I'll pray. When I get pissed off, I'll say the prayer, serenity prayer. All the time, I need to know I put it this way. This is the way I live my life. Just like a bike, this is not my saying, by the way. I'm not going to take this. Just like a bike, there's two mechanics of a bike. There's pedaling and there's steering, correct? So the way I look at my spirituality is that today, Jama is the peddler. I get the pedal. That means I need to put in work. I have to actually physically, they say, the program works with that faith without works is dead. So I need to work, whatever that looks like. I need to stay involved in recovery. I need to stay involved in my schooling. I need to stay involved in my goals. There is an element of work. However, pedaling is only one part of the mechanics. Second part is the steering. And that's what screwed me up so much in addiction because I wanted everything to go my way. If only this didn't happen, if I could erase this aspect, if I could remove this incident that happened when I was a kid. And like I was just steering, I was taking the wheel. So today I just let God, creator, steer. And sometimes he's going to steer left and I'm not going to like it. And that's okay. That's okay because I'm not in control. Like, honestly, if I could think about one thing, it's like I'm just letting him steer now. Every single day, just sit back and watch him steer. And when I watch them steer, just amazing things have happened, man. Like amazing things. Like some days I just wake up and I'm like, man, God is so good. Like I can't believe He put this all in my life. So I give all the glory to Him because all the things that I achieved, in the last 4 years, overwhelming some days.
That's amazing. It's a big paradigm shift to go from wanting to control our life to giving up that control, and through prayer, through meditation, through surrender, letting this sort of intangible, unseeable power, energy, or consciousness direct our life. It goes very counterintuitive to what a lot of people in our society do, right? A lot of emphasis is placed on, like make the effort yourself, like rise up to the challenge, which are all good instructions, but a lot of it is rooted in ego, right? And like, boost your ego through all of these accomplishments. And for you and I, we are still, like you said, pedaling that bike, but we're not necessarily striving for something that's simply coming from our desires, right? Our selfish impulses and desires. So that's really cool that you were able to make that shift. Um, can you tell me what were some of the biggest challenges of the recovery process for you, for those who might be listening who are going through it right
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, for real. So like one of this isn't gonna happen to everyone. This is not everyone's experience, but I had a lot of stuff happen to me in recovery, and I'll share one story. I don't know if you even know this about me, but I think I told you. But so there's gonna be good times. There's gonna be bad times. Like I said, you have to stay tapped in at all times. At least I do. So it was my first year of university. I just finished university and I wanted to see my family. I hadn't seen my biological family in a long time. So my older brother and my mom, I went to go see them in a neighborhood I shouldn't have been really hanging out with. It's a hood, and so this night, just like any other night, like they're like smoking and stuff, and I don't want to be in no hot box. Like I was like, if we're gonna smoke, like let's set up on the porch and I'll play music and stuff, and you guys we can go out there. So that's what we did, and it was Canada Day, and there was fireworks and stuff. And after the fireworks finished, um, I'm playing music super loud and just posted up on the porch there, and next thing you hear is pop, 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 and I look over to my left and I look at my brother. I'm like, yo, that's fucking gunshots. And before I could even really react to what I just like my body could react to what I might have or may have just heard. All of a sudden, you hear like boom, boom, and like it was all so fast, but I just remember like I'm getting shot now, like they're shooting at us, and for the next, I would say 20 seconds, there was just gunfire being rained all around me, like just like hiding for cover, trying to get to a spot where they can't hit you. And when I was hiding for cover, I felt something hit the side of my face, and I like there was liquid coming down, and I just didn't know what that was, like how bad that injury was at the time. I just knew I was bleeding from my wrists and my head, and eventually the gunfire stopped after like 20 seconds and the nightmare was over. But there's one memory that sticks out to me and it still haunts me. But like I remember just looking at my older brother with blood coming down my face, and I'm like, they hit me, they got me, Tyler. Like get help. And he just went white as a ghost, man. That's something I never want to see in him again. But we ended up calling the police, and the police came, and I found out that I was just it was like a ricocheting bullet that hit me. So I was gonna be okay. And it was just like, a minor kind of gunshot wound to my side of my head and my wrist and stuff. So I was like, okay, like, but after that, that anxiety was terrible, man. Like it was really bad. So Um, I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about going back to my old way after that, you know? Um, and what I did is I just doubled down on faith, man. Like I've seen so many people go through situations, losing a son or losing a family member, and they just doubled down on faith. So that's what I did, man. I just started ramping it back up, you know, doing what the basics told me to do. And so I got over that and I was able to, you know, go back to school in September and continue on another successful year. And just last year, I got a call from my mom. I was actually in the same library. This is crazy. This is weird. I was in the exact same seat, same library, and I finished. I got a call from my mom, and I walked outside, and she told me my father just got murdered. And I was like, I just remember the phone being like silent, like for like 10 seconds. I didn't know how to respond to that. Like I was trying to process it all. And I had an exam the next morning, and this may be crazy, but I'll share this with the viewers because some people don't understand Jama Maxie, but it's kind of like explains. So I get this call, and I'm like feeling these emotions. I get in my car, I just start praying. I just start praying for my father, Bushman, and and I just ask God for the next right thing to do, you know, like for some guidance. And some voice told me, you know, like take this exam the next morning for Bushman. Like it's what he would want you to do. And so I listened to that voice, and I was crying, coming back into this library that I'm at right now, and I just studied, finished doing what I would have normally done if I didn't get that phone call. And the next morning, woke up early, studied, prayed, and I took the test, and the teacher told me the next day I scored in the top 10 out of a class of like 250 students, and I was my highest mark of the semester. And I know my father would have been proud if he there. So, but yeah, I definitely had a lot of challenges. You know what I mean? Like times where like, you know, if I were to relapse, like and during any of those times, people would be like, they would be mad. Like you would be mad, but you know, people would understand. So, but that's not my experience, man. My experience is people go through suffering, terrible times, and it's what we do when we go through that. You know, accepting life on life's terms. You know, like I said about the steering thing. You know, earlier I talked about steering, and you know, sometimes in recovery, people have steered me left. Situations have steered me left, and I'm trying to take the wheel and be like, no, 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 no. That's when I'm just like, I'm gonna accept it. I'm gonna accept it and ride with you.
That's amazing. Both of those stories that you told about, getting shot and then, your father passing away, and you being able to use the tools that you learned in the program, most importantly, the faith, right, that you were developing to overcome those traumatic experiences and actually, turn them into motivation or into something that actually made you stronger and made you succeed. I think it's important for people to hear those kinds of stories because oftentimes people talk about relapsing and, this happened or that happened, like my boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with me, and then they'll use that as an excuse to just, go and go back to their old ways.
Yeah,
And it doesn't have to be that way, right? All you have to do is use those simple tools like prayer, like faith, like inventory, and whatever else you might be doing that helped you get to recovered, to overcome them. Because recovery is about choices, right? It's constantly, do I choose A or B? And if we're making the choice that aligns with who we want to become or who God wants us to become, um, I trust that that's always going to produce a much better result than if I take back those handlebars and try to, take back my will and, do something different.
yeah, definitely. You know, like I think what's the term called reservation? We talk about that a lot of people have reservations, and to me, like my recovery looks like no reservations ever. Like, you know, my phone could ring right now, and it could be some terrible news, or whatever could happen in my life. I can't have a reservation, right? Um, it's one day at a time. It's really that simple.
Yeah, I agree. Um, now the podcast is called Recovery Plus, and the plus is really about what people do after their initial program of recovery. So for you and I, that was the 12-step program. I'm always curious about what people do then to continue growing, because for myself, and I want to ask you if it's true for you as well. For myself, I found that no matter what program we do, after a while, it kind of becomes repetitive and it doesn't produce enough of a stimulus to create more growth or more positive change. It sort of becomes more of like a maintenance thing. And that's what happened with me in the 12 steps. It produced this incredible change in feeling and attitude. But after a certain while, it stopped working to produce more and more change in me. And I had to seek further growth through other means. So for you, you mentioned kind of exploring your Indigenous culture and spirituality through that. Was that a big part of your continued recovery, or has it been?
Yeah, absolutely. Like this, so like crazy story. Like I never went back to my reserve in by Regina, where I was born, and just this summer, um, I went back, and this is like where my homeland, you know. This is where my all my ancestors are. You know, I went to it's called the Big Stones Cemetery. My great great grandfather was very well known chief in Sioux Nation. I went to ceremony out there, powwow, and like it was just so powerful, man. Like I can't even explain how powerful those ceremonies are, man. Like dancing, songs, prayer. It's so like lifting, you know, to know I come from these great people and this culture is just so beautiful. And I think indigenous culture, you know, it's so like soul enriching, and I felt like my soul being enriched in that experience. And especially we indigenous people, we believe in land connection, like our body remembers the land, and so to speak. And I went on this it's called Hard Hill. It's in my reserve. I'm from the prairies, right? So like there's not a lot of hills, and there's just one hill. It's called Hard Hill, and it you can see like everywhere. You know, it's giant hill. It's weird. It's in the prairies, but anyways, it's right by my uncle's ranch. And when I went up there, like I remember my mom kind of telling me about like when she was a kid. That was like a spot where she went, and so like I felt like a spiritual connection to the land. Like I can't even explain it to you, but like when I saw that, it was beautiful. It was so gorgeous, man. Like I get goosebumps even talking about it, man. Because like um, it was like 8 o'clock, like the sun's going down. You can see all of like the prairies, you know, and when I'm up there, like I just said a prayer for my cookum, which is my how we say grandma. It was died at a young age. She went to residential schooling, Canada's residential schooling, and you know, like I often think about her and her suffering, and because that's kind of why my mom is the way she is, you know. And you know, I just thought about like all my ancestors played on this hill, and now I'm, you know, touching the land, and I'm feeling that connection. I could feel my grandmother kind of speaking to me, like, you know, welcome home, you know. So it was a surreal experience for sure. And I continue to practice, you know, indigenous spirituality and different things that we do with our medicines. And I just try and learn more. And it's just such a beautiful culture. And I think that a lot of people like when I show people like smudging and things like that, they're like, man, like that's so cool. Like, can I do it? And like, you don't have to be native to do this, man. Like, you know, so I just try and show it to other people, and because I think a lot of people are scared of like the idea of God, you know, and they don't realize it doesn't have to be, you know, so to speak, like a face, so to speak, you know. So, but yeah, that's something I continue to do all the time, and it's really enriched my soul, like to know like my identity, like where I come from, and I'm looking forward to do some more things within the next, couple years to do some more. We have so many great ceremonies. So I'm just looking forward to taking part in those ceremonies and connecting further with the creator.
That's really cool. Even when you're describing that moment, I can feel sort of like this soul enriching energy as you're talking about going up on that hill and thinking about your cookum and everything that means to you. You mentioned the word identity. It sounds like you're exploring that part of your identity in a way that is incredibly meaningful and positive. You and I have both talked about how identity has become sort of a very politicized thing, and how for example, there's a certain view that someone that comes from your background needs to be angry, needs to be resentful, needs to feel like they're oppressed. Can you tell me like how you've maybe fought against that, or how maybe going against that kind of thinking has actually helped you to succeed rather than staying in the place where you were?
Yeah, simple mindset. If I'm disturbed, I'm the problem. So I that's how I live my life. Like if I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. It's not something wrong with the other 8 billion people, the organizations, the places, the things. That's really what acceptance looks like for me. And that's how I started to get well. Was if I'm disturbed, like if someone yells at me, someone does something I don't like, or if I have some sort of resentment, there's something wrong with me. Like it doesn't matter what the transgressions of the other person. I'm glad when there's something wrong with me. Like I know that sounds weird, but like if I get in this situation where I have this resentment or this anger, and I can look at myself and like, oh, there's something wrong with you. I'm like, yes, good, perfect, amazing, because that means there's a solution. Like there's something to work on. Like if there's nothing wrong with me, that's not good, because then it's just the world the problem, and that's not a good thing. So touching on that question would be like just understanding a lot of like, okay, here's the situation. Like here's my identity. Here's my specific state of oppression. There's not much I'm going to change at that right now. Sitting 1 week sober. Like I'm not gonna like do anything about that. So the way I look about change, especially because I've been able to make change and stuff, is first you change yourself. So that looked like, to me, I had to do small micro habits such as making my bed every single morning. The first thing I did, even though my mattress smelled like piss, but I still had to make my bed, and I had to do the small little things every single day, and I had to get my own act together. And then when I got my act together, I could start to, kind of influence my family and my kinship. So now I'm taking responsibility of my kin. I'm taking responsibility of my family, and that's a big burden to carry. Because anyone who knows that, taking responsibility, being the leader in your family is not something easy, so to speak. Next, I'm taking responsibility of my community. So now that I've got my act together, I got my family kind of together. Um, I'm trying to get my community together, which to me was my Indigenous community, right? So now, like a couple years into this thing, I was just like, okay, I gotta help my people. I gotta be a leader, not just for myself, not just for my family, it's for my community. And I made some actual change, and like that's where the success has kind of started, like when I started making community impact, because people started to hear about my individual transgression and transcendence into a better life. And next thing you know, I'm doing I'm public speaking, for Indigenous organizations. And the last, I would say, about year and a half, like I've had such amazing experiences, like changing community. Like I spoke at the Senate building of Canada this year as the Indigenous youth leader. I got to speak in front of the mayor and the deputy prime minister at Truth and Reconciliation Day downtown Toronto. Like I've just had so many experiences now where I've made like community impact. So for me, like I had to change as an individual, and when I got my act together, then I could change the community. So um, That's the way I look at making change, because a lot of people just want to jump right to community change, right? And like you can't change a community if you can't make your bed, you know? Like I couldn't do anything, you know? I couldn't even match my socks. I couldn't brush my teeth. I literally just woke up and got drunk and high. Like what am I changing, bro? So like I just had to look inside, change myself, transcend myself, and then the rest change. And I just don't, and I learned that I'm being a victim is not a good thing, right? So yes, it is true that terrible things happen to me, my people, and I'll advocate that when I have a chance. You know, I try and speak the truth. Another is honesty, right? I'm not going to say things just to um, get my desired goal. I'm going to say that what I believe to be true, you know, and just kind of speak your truth. But where I'm going with this would be like today, I it is true that I am a victim, but I don't act like a victim. If that makes any sense.
That's cool, man. Thank you. That's one of the things that really kind of made me respect you a lot, is the fact that you were not doubling down on some sort of victim narrative, but that you were actually just saying, like, it's my responsibility to change myself, and then through that I can also help others. Because if I'm resentful, if I'm angry, if I disempower myself by looking at myself as a helpless person whose life is directed by what other people say and do, then how helpful can you truly be to your community? And
Yeah,
all these things that you're doing now in such a short period of time are, I think, a testament to the way that you think, and the way that you think, I think, has a lot to do with the 12-step program, and of course a few other people that I know you follow and you listen to, that have that message. I wanted to ask you now, kind of what goals do you have for your future? What's inspiring you right now to continue to move in that direction?
yeah. My life today, when I wake up in the morning, it's supercharged with meaning. Like I know that it's not just about Jama Maxie anymore. It's about the people coming up behind me and living for those people. It's about living for my ancestors. It's about, you know, my ancestors did not have the opportunity to go to York University or to, you know, do the things that I'm doing. So my goals are one day at a time. Really, my brain just operates one day at a time. But I do have goals. It's silly not to have goals, but I just try and my main thing is just focusing on the day, like every single day. Just you know, are you proud of the 24 hours you had in the sense of like, did you do the things you wanted to do? Um, and check off your task list. So, you know what I mean? So, but my goals is to I want to, right now, I'm in a specialized honors thesis program at York University. By next year, I'll be applying to graduate school. And the number one school right now for psychology is UBC. And UBC is a beautiful, beautiful campus. And when I started this journey, I remember seeing pictures of UBC and just like visualizing it, like me walking around campus, the number one school for psych, against the odds my whole life and just making it. So it's going to be a very hard goal. It's and again, like you know, those people who are like in the 5% club, like those people have to you know to work really hard and there's like 200 applicants and there's only like 8 people get accepted every year, you know. So it's a tough journey, but I put in as much work as I can every single day to make that possible. And then, you know, I want to become a clinician, a clinical psychologist, and work with Indigenous peoples and be a practicing clinician and continue speaking. I like being a speaker, talking in front of crowds, sharing my message, and that's really where I get a lot of like impact because when I sometimes Indigenous people we have this way of therapy. It's called narrative therapy, and we practice in Indigenous culture. It's what an elder will do. Narrative therapy is you kind of telling your story, and through storytelling, you can make a lot of impact to another person's life. And I think that's quite evident today, or anyone that is in recovery, how powerful that can be. And when I do tell my story and I do this public speaking stuff, it's terrible. A lot of the times I cry, man. Like, and I'm not crying because I'm like sad. Like people like I try to explain to people I'm crying. I only cry at the end. It's because like when I spoke at the Truth and Reconciliation Day, and the mayor and deputy prime minister started giving me a standing ovation, I just spilled it all out there my whole entire life, and started crying. But like I was crying because I'm like I started to like have like these weird like flashbacks, like, man, like you came from this and you're getting the standing ovation from the, essentially the person under Justin Trudeau, like our prime minister. Like, fuck, like, it's like tears of joy. But yeah, I just want to continue my education, and continue to make impacts, and whatever God has in store for me, I'm accepted. And I really think that in order to set these high goals, you have to be very ambitious. And I've always been very ambitious and goal driven, but it's daunting. Some people look at me like 6 more years of school, like, like, yes.
That's so cool, man. Yeah, and yeah, to go from where you were to where you are now, and with the big goals that you have for yourself, I would also just feel very emotional when I think about like all of that. Because in recovery, sometimes I personally forget how far I've come, and from where I was to where I am now. It's easy for me to get fixated on, like I'm not where I still want to be, rather than look how far I've actually made it, right? And taking the time to appreciate all of that. I want to end this interview with you by asking you one more question, and that would be, what message do you have for people who are listening to this podcast who are struggling with addiction right now? What would you say to those people?
You are never alone. You are never alone. And I think if you are able to be vulnerable and open up to the world, and actually go into the parts of yourself that you don't necessarily like, or the times in which you don't necessarily like, and you share that, I could throw a rock right now to people that, could identify with my story. And I learned that through life. Like I always thought like everyone was so put together and no one could resonate with any of the traumas or abuses I went through or anything like that, man. Once I started telling this stuff, like once I started speaking and I started getting vulnerable, young men come up to me and said like, that happened to me too when I was a kid, and like, thank you, Jama, like you're such an inspiration. And like you can honestly, man, you can throw a rock to someone who's got some shit, very deep in them. And you're never alone. You're never alone, man. And I would say to those people that it's possible. It is possible. And it's going to take a lot of discipline and a lot of hard work, but love yourself, learn to love yourself, and be okay to sit in a dark room and kind of be okay with your thoughts, because for so long I was not okay with that. I needed to numb that out. I didn't love myself. Today I love myself, and that's authentic and powerful.
Thank you, Jem. As a fellow recovered addict, I know what it's like to be where you were, and we know it's not easy to get to a better place, but it is possible. So thank you so much for coming on the show to share that message of strength and hope with our audience. Yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vas.
God bless.
God bless.